All right, let's get right into it. When you hear the word minimalism, you probably think of those super clean, all white rooms you see all over Instagram, right? Just a design trend. But what if it's way, way deeper than that? What if it's actually like a signature of your personality, something that points to the literal wiring of your brain? That's what we're digging into today, the real psychology behind why some of us crave empty spaces, and what that tells us about, well, all of us. So picture this. You walk into a room that's really sparse, almost empty. For one person, there's this immediate physical reaction, a loosening in their chest. It's like, I can finally breathe. But then you have another person, standing in the exact same spot, who just feels off, a little uneasy, maybe even kind of sad. The room doesn't feel calm to them, it feels cold. So what is going on here? What separates these two people? Is it just like liking different types of music? Is it just taste? Well, it turns out the answer has almost nothing to do with taste and everything to do with our fundamental needs as human beings. Okay, so let's peel back that first layer. We're going to move right past the aesthetics and look at one of the deepest drivers of our own well-being. Psychologists talk about this crucial need we all have called autonomy. And really, it's just a fancy word for that feeling that your life is your own, that you're in the driver's seat. For people who have a really strong, deep need for that feeling, a stripped-back room isn't about what's missing. Oh no. It is powerful, visible proof that their environment belongs to them, not the other way around. It's a statement of personal identity and, yeah, control. So, okay, we've got this psychological need for autonomy, but the story goes even deeper, like right down to our biology. Let's talk about how our nervous systems, our very own wiring, actually process the world. So there's this fascinating research from a psychologist named Elaine Aron, and it suggests that a pretty big chunk of us, about 15 to 20%, are what she calls highly sensitive people. Now hold on, this doesn't mean more emotional. It means their nervous systems are literally built differently from the ground up. The actual trait is called sensory processing sensitivity. And for this group, that's sort of natural filter that most people have for, background noise, visual distractions. It's just much, much thinner. Basically, everything gets in. So for them, a minimalist space isn't really a lifestyle choice. It's a biological necessity. It's about creating a sanctuary where their brains can finally function without being constantly bombarded. And this idea connects to something we can all understand, this concept of cognitive load. Let me give you a really simple analogy. Just imagine for a second that your brain's processing power for the day is like your phone battery. Every single object you can see, that stack of mail, those books on the floor, each one is like a little notification. You might not be consciously focused on it, but your brain is spending a tiny bit of energy to process it in the background. A clear, minimalist space basically turns off all those notifications. It protects your mental battery for the stuff that actually matters, deep thinking. This all leads to an even more profound question. If our surroundings have such a big impact on our minds, what about our stuff? What role do our possessions play in who we think we are? So, way back in 1988, a consumer psychologist named Russell Belk came up with this idea he called the extended self. And the theory is that we, often without even realizing it, absorb our belongings into our sense of identity. In a very real way, we are what we own. So here's the real kicker. For most people, identity is built by collecting things. My stuff says who I am. But that's a really fragile way to live, right? Things can break, get lost, be stolen. A minimalist, whether they know it or not, is often shifting to a totally different model, an identity that comes from the inside. It doesn't need a warehouse of stuff to feel whole, which makes it so much more resilient to whatever life throws at you. But, and this is a big but, here comes the twist. The very same traits that can lead to this really intentional, strong way of living, well, they can have a dark side, especially when things get tough. When we are under an enormous amount of stress, our basic psychological wiring, it doesn't change. But what we ask that wiring to do for us, that changes everything. That deep need for autonomy, that craving for sensory calm, it can tip over from being a healthy choice into something that feels, well, compulsive. And this is where we get into something psychologists call compensatory behavior. This is when we use a very real, very controllable action, like, say, wiping down a counter, to try and manage a feeling that's totally abstract and out of our control, like grief or fear. Let's make this real. Think about someone who just went through a horrible breakup. Their internal world is a wreck. So they start clearing things out. And every single object that leaves the house gives them this tiny little hit of control, a feeling of agency. But that feeling fades. And pretty soon, their definition of what feels like clutter gets smaller and smaller, and the whole cycle just repeats, trapping them. And at this point, it's crucial to see what's happening. From the outside, it looks like peace, but it's actually avoidance. The simplicity that was supposed to be about freedom has become its own kind of prison. The goal isn't to create space to live in anymore, it's to create distance from what they're feeling inside. So, after going through all these different layers, the psychological, the biological, the emotional, it really all boils down to one essential question that we need to ask ourselves. As we've seen, this drive for minimalism is super complex. It can be a healthy expression of your autonomy, a real biological need for calm, a smart way to protect your mental energy, or a shift to a stronger sense of self. But it can also be a coping mechanism, a way to feel in control when everything feels out of control. And honestly, a lot of these things can be true for the same person at the same time. And that right there, that's the real takeaway from all of this. It's about looking past the Instagram aesthetic, past the trends, and asking, what is my nervous system, my actual body, really asking for? Forget what you think you're supposed to feel for a second. Just pay attention to your physical reaction. Do you notice your jaw clenching up when you walk into a cluttered room? Do your shoulders drop like an inch when you walk into a clear one? That gut reaction, that's your data. It's the most honest feedback you are ever going to get. And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. With everything going on, with all the noise of daily life, have you ever just stopped long enough, created enough quiet, to actually listen for that answer? Because it just might tell you more than you think.